Welcome to the 902 Podcast, the official podcast of the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office in Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm Captain John Vick, and I want to thank you for tuning in. This podcast will give you an inside look at LSO with topics and guests to discuss public safety issues impacting Lancaster County. Be sure to subscribe for highlights on news, cases, and the people working for you at LSO. You can also follow us across social media by searching for @LSO Nebraska. That's @LSO Nebraska on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. Welcome to the 902 Podcast. Today we are here to talk about child advocacy centers. And in studio we have Sheriff Terry Wagner. Hello, Sheriff.
Good afternoon, John.
Chief Deputy Ben Houchin is here.
Happy Friday.
And we are glad to have Paige Piper from the BraveBe Child Advocacy Center right here in Lincoln joining us today. Thanks for being here, Paige.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. We want to get into BraveBe and all the things that it does for us here in Lincoln. But before we do that, I wanted to hear a little bit about you so that our listeners can get to know who you are. So tell us a little bit about your story, Paige.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I have a strange story getting to BraveBe. This is certainly not what I thought I was going to be doing if you would have asked me 10, 15, even 20 years ago. My story and journey to BraveBe really started, I went to Nebraska Wesleyan University, and so that's just down the road from BraveBe. So I've become just a little bit familiar with the agency and thought, gosh, the work that they're doing is so important, and it's a service I could have used when I was a kid. And so my career ended up taking me to Omaha to work for Legal Aid of Nebraska, as well as a variety of different nonprofits, primarily in fundraising. And in 2016, I had the opportunity to join the BraveBe staff as the development director and served in that role for 2 years. And then thought, someday I'd really like to be in an even higher leadership role. I can see myself doing this, but I knew I had a lot to learn. A nonprofit is truly a business at its core, and I thought, I know so much about the services and I know a lot about fundraising, but I didn't know a lot about business. And so I took a leap of faith and I left, and I went to the for-profit sector where I worked for a company called Bulu. So if you're familiar with subscription boxes like Dollar Shave Club or Stitch Fix, I had the opportunity to do that for billion-dollar brands like Disney and Crayola and Clorox, primarily in a marketing and new business role. So had a ton of fun, got to travel all over, meet some really interesting teams. And I owe so much to Paul and Stephanie Jarrett, who run Bulu, who helped equip me with knowledge and skills that I didn't have. So when this position came open for executive director, I threw my name in the hat and the board took a chance on me. And so I have officially been back for 3 years. I took over in June of 2020, which I do not recommend to anybody taking on any sort of leadership role during a global pandemic. But it's my dream job at my dream organization. I feel so fortunate to get to do what I do.
Awesome. Kind of an LSO connection there too with Paul Jarrett's dad.
Yeah. Paul's dad was chief deputy sheriff here for 3 years and spent 35 years here. So yeah, I've known Paul since he was an infant. So yeah.
Oh, and they tell the best stories about the sheriff's department.
I'll bet they do.
Well, before we dive into BraveBe itself, let's talk a little bit about child advocacy centers in general, and what are they and why do we need them?
Absolutely. So the Child Advocacy Center movement itself started in the 1980s, and it was founded by a county attorney named Bud Kramer. And what Bud saw was that really the child welfare system was not set up in favor of the victim. We were doing a lot of siloed activities to be able to provide an investigation and try to support that child. But ultimately, there were kind of 3 key issues that Bud identified. He said, first, the information sharing is not happening to the degree that we would like it to because we have so many investigative parties involved. Second, we were interviewing kids up to 17 times. So I use the example of, teachers are our number one reporter. We find out about allegations from teachers more than anyone else. And it makes sense. They've got close relationships with kids and with families. So oftentimes what would happen if that child disclosed at school is the teacher would ask a lot of questions, and then we might take the kiddo to the principal's office. That was pretty common policy and practice. I can tell you I was in the principal's office one time as a child, and you'll be shocked because I was talking too much in class. Terry's laughing a little too hard. No, you know me well enough. No. But it sent the message I was in trouble. And so when you have a child sharing the most sensitive thing that's ever happened to them, taking them to the principal's office sends a pretty scary message. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes cases would stop there. If it progressed, we're oftentimes involving a school nurse. We might call law enforcement. Now you have a uniformed cop with a gun belt coming down to talk to that kiddo. So if I wasn't in trouble talking to the principal, oh my goodness, well, I sure am now if I've got a cop coming to talk to me. And that case just progressed, including potentially taking the child to the hospital and having to talk to a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, county attorney. So just, I encourage everyone for just a moment to think about the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And then think about having to retell that in detail 17 times. It's pretty extreme.
Yeah.
Especially when you're an innocent child and you don't have any life experience whatsoever, then going in and having to have that done. It's hard enough on adults, let alone being a little
kid.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So Bud Kramer said, this isn't right. We shouldn't be doing this to kids and making that expectation of them. And so part of the founding of the Child Advocacy Center was to say, hey, we need one neutral location to conduct one interview. And I'll talk about what that means for us in a little while. And then kind of the third key issue is the criminal court system is very complicated. It's a lot of big words, a lot of complex procedures.
And scary.
And scary, very scary. And we were expecting children and families to navigate this without much support. And so Bud said, hey, if we really want to impact prosecution rates and hold people accountable for crimes against children, we need to do a better job of supporting children and families through that process. So the Child Advocacy Center model was originally founded by Bud Kramer in Huntsville, Alabama. And over time, it started to catch wind nationwide. And we were so fortunate here in Lincoln that a group from Lincoln, which I know, Terry, you can tell the story because you were one of our founders, a group came together to say, hey, we need to go to Huntsville and learn about this model, and we need to make it happen here. So that legwork really started in 1996. And we had the privilege of opening our doors in what we call the Little Yellow House on October 11th of 1998.
Interestingly enough, former Lancaster County Attorney, late Lancaster County Attorney Gary Lacey, had gone to a National District Attorney's meeting. By this time, Bud Kramer had been elected to Congress. So he did a presentation at the National District Attorney's Convention about the CAC concept. And so Gary came back all fired up, got us together as agency heads and shareholders in this process. And, of course, if you knew Gary at all, you know he didn't take no for an answer. So, we worked on that. We traveled to see the different styles of CACs that were around. Many of them were based out of hospitals at that time. Some were standalones like we are. Some were based or connected with a law enforcement government building. But ultimately, we decided that, a standalone facility was really what we needed. And Gary and then Lynn Ayers, who was part of the original planning group when she was with HHS, became the executive director. And, Mayor Mike Johans at the time, for $1, gave us the caretaker's home in Antelope Park, which is the Little Yellow House that Paige referred to. So it really came together quickly. Great group of folks. We involved a lot of. It's a really unusual public-private partnership, and you don't see many boards that are that way. But a lot of board members were solicited back then for the contributions that their organization could bring to the CAC, and then to the government stakeholders who would be users of the facility. So yeah, it was an interesting concept, and it's worked great. We changed our policies to incorporate the CAC concept into our policies so that deputies know exactly how it should work. With almost very little pushback in the beginning for some officers and some deputies to give up their case to somebody else to do the interview. But that didn't last long at all, and it's been a great
experience. Well, we used to send officers and deputies down to
right.
Alabama all the time
yes.
and do that, but that's kind of changed now too as time goes on. And I think that was probably a good change too for it on that front. Yeah.
Well, and Sheriff, maybe you can speak to some of those changes, and Paige, you too, as far as how did we get from the little yellow house to where we're at today?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of notes on that I want to share. First, one thing that I feel so proud of is watching that partnership grow. We serve not only Lancaster County, but 16 additional rural counties. So these are services that we're providing really all across southeastern Nebraska. And when you think about all of the folks who are involved in that, from law enforcement, health and human services, medical and mental health professionals, our job is really to sit at the center of all of that and ensure that all of those services are collectively surrounding the victim to support them. And part of that is, of course, through the investigative process, but a large portion of that is also figuring out how do we help that child on a journey to resilience? And what does that mean for them? What do they need to move forward from some really, really horrible stuff? So one thing that we feel very proud of is now CAC services are actually mandated by Nebraska state statute. And that was the work of many, many folks all across the state who saw that importance, and it required that collaboration, that public-private partnership that Terry was talking about. It's so validating to know that so many people believe in the mission and in what CACs are providing to the investigation and for kids and families, that we now have that in our state statute. So our little yellow house, our numbers grew drastically over the years.
Started with a staff of 1.
Yeah,
Wow.
Lynn was our only staff member.
Ended
for
with a
quite
staff
while.
of 17 when we moved out of there. So this was a 2-bedroom, 800 square foot footprint
Yep.
basement. So it was bulging at the seams very quickly.
We quite literally had staff officing in closets.
Yeah.
Maya, who's been with us, close to 20 years now. I mean, we had the opportunity to go back and see her old office. It was an actual closet, because at that point we were just filling every square inch of that space. And it's still so important to us and such an important part of our history. But we realized to meet the need of the community, we really needed to expand. So that facility, our current facility, opened in January of 2011. After launching, we've got great timing, launched a capital campaign in 2008. And luckily, thanks to some incredible leaders, including Larry the Cable Guy, who made the famous or infamous $1 million donation to make that facility possible, we were able to come on over and have since grown to a staff of 30. And so we have 30 folks on our team who are actively serving children out of that space. And of course, the budget had to grow right along with that to be able to really match going from serving. When we moved into this facility, we were serving about 500 kids a month, per year. And now we're in a place where this year we're on track to serve 1,500 children.
Wow. Wow.
I'm so glad you guys have that service, but I'm sad that you have to.
Yeah.
That's the bad thing about it. I mean, it's good that it's being reported and it's being worked in that, but it's so sad that so many kids go through this. Yes.
And we've had support, really bipartisan support from every mayor that's been in the mayor's office. I mentioned Mayor Johans leased that home to us for $1. Mayor Colleen Sang saw to it that we got deed to the property we're on now in Upco Park, and so that we wouldn't be. It was a little bit more permanent solution, so we wouldn't be ousted there. But every mayor has been very supportive of the Child Advocacy Center and has been instrumental in helping to support it and continue its mission. If you want a challenging career, a career where you can make a difference in your life, your family's life, and the lives of those in your community, come and join the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office. To learn more or to apply, visit us online at www.joinlso.com.
So
new building, but now a new name too. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm happy to. So we, as part of our current expansion, so we just added on a whole additional component to our facility. It was a $5 million expansion that now allows us to co-locate with the Lincoln Police Department Special Victims Unit, which has just made already, they moved in on February 8th. It's already made a drastic difference in some immediate collaboration on cases that we've served. So to share a little bit about our name change, we really started to talk about as an internal leadership team that our legal name was Lincoln Lancaster Child Advocacy Center. And we thought, gosh, Lincoln Lancaster doesn't represent the totality of our service area because we serve so many counties that we wanted to recognize that and make sure that they understood that we were more than just that nonprofit agency in Lincoln, that we were also actively working with Falls City and York and Seward. And then as we thought about it, we thought a child advocacy center is what we do, not necessarily who we are. So we're very fortunate that one of our board members, Lynn Weinman, who's the founder and director over at Kid Glove, a brilliant marketing professional, really helped us identify the who. And so what we did is she started with a data collection process where she surveyed our MDT, our multidisciplinary team partners, surveyed our staff, surveyed kids that we had worked with, surveyed our donors, and what we found through that is over and over and over again, the number one word used to describe the kids that we work with is brave. And if you walk our walls, we have a stairwell where we invite children who have received our services to leave a message for the next kid and family who come through. And that word brave is written over and over again. And so we started toying with this idea of how can we incorporate brave into our name? And we did not like be brave because that's a command and we shouldn't have to force children to be brave. But they are brave when they're coming to us. And so when they came back with the name BraveBe Child Advocacy Center to recognize their BraveBe and the actualization of what it means to be brave, we knew right then that that's our who. Our who is to help children find their bravery by sharing their story boldly with us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, with that, let's talk a little bit about the services that BraveBe does provide. So we've touched on a few of them, but what is kind of the spectrum of services that you offer to the public?
Absolutely. So we have a variety of services that we offer that are intended to meet the physical, mental, and emotional needs of victims when they're coming to us. So one of the very first services that kids receive is through case coordination, and that's a piece that they'll never see. But one of the really interesting things that we do at our center and really all across our great state is that every report of child abuse that comes through the Nebraska Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline comes to our team. And really what we're looking for is, does that meet state statute for utilization at our center? We don't want any kiddos to fall through the cracks. And on the back end, we're helping coordinate and we're facilitating meetings with all of the professionals who are working these cases to make sure we're talking about these kids and families. And the folks who have been in these roles have been in them a long time, so oftentimes they recognize names, patterns, et cetera, to ensure that we have a coordinated and quick response. So on the child-facing side, when they come to our center, we call it the farmhouse. When they come to the farmhouse, right away we're greeting them, and part of our job is to help give them choice. That's oftentimes one of the first things that victims lose. And so it's an opportunity to be a kid. Part of what we do is we get to just welcome them and play. The advocate gives them a full tour of our facility, and then they talk with their forensic interviewer. So the forensic interview itself is it's a trauma-trained professional who's help collecting the testimony of the child. And we do that in a super child-friendly and trauma-informed way. So we are never leading, we're non-biased through that process, but our job is to really help explore what happened to support the investigation. So when that's happening, members of your team, members of the police department, county attorney's office, health and human services will watch the live stream of that interview. And we'll try to collect as much detailed data as we can during that process. So the forensic interview is a really key component of the investigation itself.
Sorry for interrupting, but then the investigative agencies can suggest or say, can you ask this question or can you get this information? Or so it's an interaction kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, and the goal is to have one interview. We don't want to bring them back, so we want to collect everything we can during that time.
Yeah.
After they complete their interview, they receive a head-to-toe medical evaluation, and that's an opportunity to meet with a provider to make sure that their bodies are healthy or will heal. One really important thing to mention is that at least 95% of the time, those exams are normal. And I share that in part because just because it's a normal exam doesn't mean that the trauma didn't happen. We just know that our bodies heal really, really quickly. But for some kids, it becomes more important to have that education piece. After they've experienced abuse, especially sexual abuse, they have questions about their bodies. And so being able to meet with the provider and have that reassurance that they're going to be okay makes a really big difference in terms of their own healing journey. Beyond that, we also have advocates on our staff, and our advocates they are true heroes for kids and families. And part of their job, I talk about them as being a bridge and a translator. When I say a bridge, part of what I mean by that is that during the time the child is participating in the forensic interview, the advocate is meeting with what we call the non-offending caregiver. So a safe person for that child, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, foster parent, whoever that may be. And we're really seeking to understand the family dynamic so that we can offer the best support services, whether that's therapy or oftentimes we work with families who express food insecurity, housing insecurity, domestic violence. And so we're able to bridge and partner with them to say, hey, we can't address the long-term impact of trauma if you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, or how to pay your electric bill. So that's an important part of what they do. And then as cases progress through that criminal justice system, we kind of serve as the central point for all of that communication. So we're checking in and we're asking for updates on the investigative status so that we can share that back with the family. If cases become court involved, then we provide court advocacy, including a super cool curriculum called Court School, where we teach kids about what does it mean to testify? What does that look like? Well, we've got a great partnership down here with the courthouse, so we can bring them on down and share with them, hey, you're going to sit here and the judge is going to be up here and the person who hurt you is going to be over here, but you just tell your story to me. So I think that court advocacy program is essential to what we're doing to help support the efforts of our county attorneys.
We don't even do that for cops, and we should. To be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's a great concept.
It is. It really is. And it certainly helps families, and it helps our county attorneys as well so that they can really focus on their role and know that we're there to help provide that support. We also have a phenomenal training and prevention program. And so part of our goal and our hope is to start to get in front of this issue. I tell everybody I would love to work myself out of a job. If we could figure out how to do that, that would be really great. But I don't think that's necessarily realistic. Instead, what I think is, how can we get in front of more kids to let them know that if they're experiencing these issues, that there's a place to help them? And how do we educate our adults on keeping kids safe? Because ultimately, as grown-ups, it's our responsibility.
It's unfortunately a lot of the abuse has gone on for years. Mm-hmm. And if we can educate children to report it sooner, or if we can educate non-offending adults to recognize those signs and to get it reported, it would go a long way to stopping that abuse. But that's one of the issues with when Paige said their physical examinations 95% of the time are normal. This abuse has gone on for a long time and very rarely gets reported to law enforcement or to any authorities when it had just happened. It's been going on, and so the physical evidence that we might expect in other crimes may not be there.
Mm-hmm. We talked about kids themselves, and understandably there's some anxiety, and you guys have done a lot of work to try and mitigate that. The sheriff mentioned, non-offending parents or non-offending caregivers. I'm sure there's a lot of anxiety for them as well. What can you say to someone? What should a parent or an adult caregiver expect when they come with a child to BraveBe?
Absolutely. It's interesting because I think that oftentimes the caregiver has more anxiety than the child. Oftentimes, especially with younger children, they don't really know or fully understand what's happened to them or that it's wrong necessarily. They don't have that frame of reference that we have as grown-ups. And so it's very common that their caregiver experiences a lot of that anxiety.
And the caregiver, especially if it's another family member that's an offender, may lose their household income.
Yes.
Their entire life may be turned upside down. And so...
Well, and just the relationship dynamic of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts there that really need to be addressed, and BraveBe does a great job of doing that.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we do to help mitigate some of that anxiety is before families even come to us, we do what we call a pre-interview phone call. And so we're calling that caregiver who's coming in and we're walking them through that process so they know what to expect. Sometimes fear of the unknown is a big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anytime we're walking into a new environment and you just received notice that something horrible has happened to your child. And to the sheriff's point, gosh, can you imagine if it's somebody who's living in your home?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tell people all the time, think about if it was your partner and somebody came to you and said that that was happening with your partner. I can imagine the disbelief.
Well, that and the guilt of it happening and not seeing it or not realizing it, that would be, you'd be blaming yourself all the time.
Absolutely. That guilt, shame, embarrassment that our caregivers experience is very real. And so part of our job during that phone call is to let them know, I know that this is a lot to take in. And I can't imagine all the things that you're feeling right now, but we want to let you know we work with a lot of families. You are not alone. And when you come here, we don't know what's going to happen next because every case is different. But you are not navigating this by yourself. You've got a team of professionals and we are going to support you through every step of that journey. Our team is on call all the time. And so if we have a caregiver or a kiddo having a really hard night, they can reach out. And that's part of our role is to help support them through that. We never want them to feel alone in that journey.
Well, I think that's a great segue to talk about your team and the people that do make it happen at BraveBe. Started out as a one-person operation,
One-man shop
with Lynn, and
Yes.
and tell us about your team today.
Absolutely. I'm so biased, but I really believe I have the best team in the whole world. I work with just incredible humans that really deeply care about the kids that we work with. You know, at our agency, one of our core values is one team, one purpose, and they exemplify that every day because so much of what we do is not just about our internal team, but about all of the partners that we work with to do that work. So we have an exceptional team of coordinators, advocates, interviewers, medical providers. We have an awesome admin team, our training and prevention team. And at the center of all of that, I think that collaboration is the most important. That I know on any given day, if we have a big case coming in or an emergency case, I know any one of those people will drop what they have on their plate and we make it happen. We really do rally together in the best interest of kids and families.
Sheriff, there's also, I've been told, a board of directors for the Child Advocacy Center. Do you know anything about that?
I do. We talked earlier about the board being a public-private collaborative. And so there are 5 permanent board members. Regardless of the people, the positions are on the board: the chief of police, head of state patrol, head of health and human services for the southeast Nebraska area, the Lancaster County attorney, and the Lancaster County sheriff. So I've been on the board now for about 25 years. I am the last surviving, not last surviving, but the last original board member still on the board. So quite an honor. It really is quite an honor. Things have changed a lot in 25 years, but it really, the government agencies that use the services of the CAC have made it a line item in their budget. We have, the county attorney has, Lincoln Police has, State Patrol has, Health and Human Services have, and the legislature has been really good about allocating funding for the child advocacy centers throughout Nebraska. So they realize the importance of it and the need for it, and it's been a great experience.
There are permanent members of the board. But
there are permanent members of the board, and then there are 17 volunteers. There are 3-year terms on the board of directors. People apply. They're vetted, and they do a background check and that sort of thing. And it's really interesting, the cross-section of people who apply to be on the board. They've heard about what great work BraveBe does. They want to be a part of that, and you can just see by the enthusiasm of some of our board members how excited they are to be a part of a group that really does make a difference in kids' lives.
Yeah. Well, where do we go from here? What are future plans at BraveBe?
Yeah, great question. So we just wrapped up our big expansion project. And so the staff and I had joked like, we're just going to take a breather, get on a plane and go on vacation. No, but really our eyes are always set to what else could we be doing for this community? How can we further deepen our impact? And, we talk a lot about, up until this point, our services are reactive in nature. The core component of a CAC is to react when something terrible has happened.
Yeah.
And so our core focus is on prevention. How do we start to get ahead of the curve? And what does it look like to start funneling efforts upstream instead of focusing so heavily on all the downstream needs? So we right now are working on an Adverse Childhood Experience Institute. And if anyone wants to go down a fun rabbit hole, or I think it's a very interesting rabbit hole, if you just Google ACE score, adverse childhood experiences are 10 potentially traumatic events that can happen before a child turns 18. And it's a longitudinal research study that was developed by Kaiser Permanente. And what they found through that study is the more trauma we experience as children, it drastically impacts our health outcomes as grown-ups. And so it increases like tenfold our risk for heart disease and cancer and all sorts of pretty scary outcomes, including for those who've experienced 6 or more ACEs. It actually reduces your lifespan by up to 20 years.
Wow.
And so understanding that research, where it can sound kind of hopeless, we said, oh, absolutely not, because with proper intervention, we can prevent that from happening. And so our core focus right now, we're partnering with Community Health Endowment to really lean into this research and develop a response for our community as a true prevention effort. So we've established a multidisciplinary advisory board that represents the health department and our hospital systems, professors from the university. It's really cross-sector. And what we're doing is we're touring all over the nation, agencies who have utilized this research to develop a response. We just went through a strategic planning session. And so we've developed a strategic plan for the project. And now we're starting to develop a response as a community. So our core focus is on how do we keep doing what we're doing exceptionally well? And then how do we develop a prevention arm to our services to create a healthier Lincoln?
Awesome. Well, before we let you go, I know we've got a little bit of time left. Our listeners are certainly going to want to know, how can they get involved? How can they help the important work that BraveBe is doing?
Absolutely. There's several great ways to really support BraveBe. The first to mention, and this is the former development director in me, that we are a nonprofit organization. So while we do receive support from all of the agencies that Terry mentioned, it takes a lot to make the agency run. And so donating to BraveBe really does make a big difference. When you think about the number of kids we're serving and the size of our staff, we're doing a lot with a little. So making a donation to BraveBe is a really great way to support us. And the best way to do that is online at bravebe.org. We also, if you're interested in learning more about BraveBe, I encourage everyone to do a couple of things. One, consider attending a training. We love getting to educate our community on how to keep kids safe and what are warning signs. How do we react? I'm a coach. I've coached for a long time. One of my very favorite curriculums is called Athletes in Abuse. And so it's very focused on coaching staff. And so we have a whole variety of curriculums that I think are really important for the community to learn. And I also encourage folks to share what you learned today. This is not a service that people want to talk about. We are still relatively young in the nonprofit world in terms of what we do. And we reformed the entire child welfare system. And so I think it's important to be able to share, tell somebody what you heard on this podcast. And then last, I wanted to mention, we do a handful of events every year that are a great way to get to know us and have a little fun. So we have 2 that are coming up. The first one is on Sunday, August 27th. If you're a disc golfer, it's the Haymarket Park Open. So one of our staff members, Jake Hedden, his 2 passions are working for BraveBe and playing disc golf.
Okay.
And he's great at both of those. So he's put together a great fundraiser that will take place out at the Salt Dog Stadium at Haymarket Park. So we'd love to invite you out. Or if disc golf isn't your thing, my very favorite event of the year is called Harvest of Hope. It's out at Gento Winery, and it's a celebration of the harvest. Really, really great opportunity. We always bring out a family who shares their story. And we just spend time in camaraderie and fellowship celebrating the great work of the center and the resilience of kids. So we'd love to have you join. And that is on Friday, September 8th this year.
Awesome. Paige, any other thoughts before we let you go today?
I have talked your ear off, so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share a story.
I do have one question. You know, when COVID hit, and that's when you started on that, did you see a decline because kids weren't in school and the reporting wasn't occurring at that point in time? And has it started to rise back up again since kids are back attending school?
That's an awesome question. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Yes. In fact, shortly after I started, it was so interesting. I received a call from a reporter and they said, hey, we heard that child abuse reporting is down. That's so great. Kids are home. They're safe. Can we do an interview with you? And I said, absolutely. You're welcome to do an interview with me, but that's not true. In fact, we're more concerned about them now than we've ever been because they've lost access to trusted adults. And we know that the vast majority of the time, the abuse that's happening to kids is happening by someone they know. And oftentimes it's happening in their own home. So our numbers tapered down a little bit in 2020. We served just under 1,000 kids. And that following year, 2021, that number went up to 1,200. Then the following year after that, 2022, it was over 1,300. And this year we're on track to serve over 1,500. So I don't think at this point we know the complete impact that COVID made. But what we do know from some research done all across the country is that anytime you have stress factors, community-wide stress factors, pandemic, job losses, economic conditions, et cetera, that violence in the household increases. And so we do think that we'll continue to serve a growing number of children, especially as they're reintegrated into their normal activities, school, sports, et cetera.
Yeah. And our population here is just growing too.
Yeah. And keep in mind, it's the 17 counties in southeast Nebraska that BraveBe services. But I want people to remember there is no other agency that provides a service that BraveBe does. And so people used to confuse us with other child welfare type of nonprofits, but we're the only one that does what we do. Mm-hmm. And so if they really want to make a difference in children's lives, BraveBe is a great location to funnel your resources, your time, your energy.
Well, Paige, we just want to thank you so much for taking time out of what we know is a busy schedule for you, but thanks for joining us on the 902 podcast today, and we'll hope to have you back on to give us an update in the future.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
You bet. That is all the time that we have for today's episode of the 902 podcast. If you have additional questions about BraveBe or want to learn more about how you can get involved, be sure to check out bravebe.org. Also, if you're interested in career opportunities at the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office, we'd encourage you to check out our website at joinlso.com. Be sure to subscribe to the 902 podcast on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you enjoy listening to podcasts, and reach out to us on social media by searching at LSO Nebraska on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Lastly, you can also reach us via email at lso@lancaster.ne.gov. Thanks for listening.